Tonight, Mark Carney's first budget, the plan to spend billions to prop up Canada's economy.
We're going to build together. We're going to build Canada strong.
Major investments, deep cuts, and a big deficit. What the budget means for you. And the Liberal caucus grows by one after a Conservative crosses the floor.
Are you disappointed?
It's very sad.
Where this leaves the opposition and its leader at issue is standing by. Breaking tonight, a shocking and deadly plane crash in Kentucky.
Watching that video, I think we're all very, very worried.
A cargo plane goes down shortly after takeoff. And the AI-powered pop star on the Billboard charts.
This is another slap in the face from this industry.
Fears over the changing face of music.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government revealed its plan to try to bolster Canada's economy, unveiling its first federal budget with billions in new spending. And tonight, that budget is one vote closer to passing after a rare defection from the opposition. Conservative MP Chris D'Entremont resigned from the Conservative caucus to join the Liberals, giving the party 170 seats, just too shy of a majority. The budget itself prioritizes infrastructure, productivity, and defense, with few new measures aimed at everyday Canadians. Major spending is on the way, intended to jolt industries hit hard by U.S. tariffs. But it all comes at a cost, with deep public service cuts, including jobs. So we'll get into all of it. Ashley Burke begins our coverage with a breakdown of the budget, the plan, the priorities, and the pushback.
So we're ready. Merci tout le monde. Merci.
A new direction for an economy under pressure.
This gives us control of our future. We're going to build together. We're going to build Canada strong, and we're starting right now.
The Carney government's first budget focused on strengthening Canada's finances, dragged down by Donald Trump's tariffs, and his attempts to pressure companies to move to the U.S.
To weather the storm of uncertainty, we will not lower our sails, Mr. Speaker. Quite the opposite. We will raise them to catch the winds of economic change.
The government's offering new incentives to compete with the U.S. and try and hold on to manufacturers, offering companies more lucrative tax write-offs.
You're going to be able to immediately expense what you've invested in technology, in equipment, in plant and machinery, in patents, and in manufacturing buildings.
A budget focused more on investment and less on social programs.
It's spending, but it's spending in a very different way than we've seen over the last decade with the previous Trudeau government.
The budget includes $141 billion in new spending over 5 years. There's money to build local infrastructure, attract new talent and researchers, and to rebuild and rearm Canada's military.
That's a huge increase in spending on national defense.
The budget includes big cuts too, reining in the government's size by 40,000 jobs and its spending with $60 billion in cuts and savings.
When you have a jobs crisis, cutting union, family-sustaining, good jobs is the opposite direction of where we want to go.
The deficit, how much the government's spending versus bringing in, is much bigger too, more than $78 billion.
Today, the Liberals have introduced the most costly and largest budget deficit in history outside of COVID.
The Conservatives say they want a budget focused on affordability, and this isn't it.
We Conservatives cannot support this costly Liberal budget.
The Bloc Québécois says it's hard to see how they could support it.
There's nothing of what we did ask in the budget.
The NDP says this budget has positives and negatives. That party's now looking it over and weighing if they can support it or not, and still hasn't ruled out abstaining from the vote altogether to avoid an election. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
So the budget was barely tabled before the next major move in the House of Commons. A Conservative MP abruptly resigned from caucus and crossed the floor to join the Liberals. Kate McKenna has been working her sources all night on this. So, Kate, this is a pretty big move that seems to give the Liberals, well, clearly just one more vote to get this budget passed.
Yeah, it puts them closer to having a majority and closer to getting this budget passed. They're now only 2 seats away from having razor-thin control of the House of Commons. But it's also a setback for the Conservatives. Chris d'Entremont was their only MP from Nova Scotia. He shared that he was crossing the floor after the budget was tabled, writing in a statement that he spoke with constituents and family and came to the conclusion that he wanted to join the Liberal caucus because it offers the best way forward, saying Prime Minister Mark Carney is offering that path with a new budget that hits the priorities I have heard most in my writing to build strong community infrastructure and grow a stronger economy. His decision is not being well received by his former Conservative colleagues.
Chris made a decision, and he made a decision not to fight inflation and not to lower the cost of food and not to do any of the things that he was sent here to do.
He ran as a Conservative. He ran to promise to make life more affordable for Canadians. The budget that we've just seen introduced by Mr. Carney absolutely does not do that. And so Mr. d'Entremont will have to reconcile what he committed to his constituents with his position today.
The party also put out a statement saying they don't know how d'Entremont could vote for a budget after running to make life more affordable for Canadians with smaller deficits and a resilient economy.
And so, I guess the obvious question, what happens now?
Well, Chris d'Entremont is set to take part in his first Liberal caucus meeting tomorrow, and the Conservatives will also be meeting, but without him. There are also questions about whether this is the last shoe to drop. Will other Conservatives consider crossing the floor? This has been the subject of speculation on Parliament Hill for weeks after some Conservative MPs privately expressed concerns over Pierre Poilievre's judgment when he appeared on a YouTube channel and called the RCMP leadership despicable. Once again, he'll be facing questions about his future leading the party.
All right, Kate McKenna, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's bring in Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton to talk all about this. So, Rosie, can we start with the party news? How big a blow is this to the Conservatives?
Listen, Adrienne, it's not a good day, right? Any floor crossing is pretty damaging, and in this case, it brings the Liberals closer to a majority. It comes as well as Pierre Poilievre has to face a leadership review in just a couple months. It also means that the Conservatives' messaging around this not being the right budget for Canada right now gets totally derailed today. And Poilievre now has to face caucus tomorrow with the possibility that there are others who are feeling frustrated with some of his previous comments and who may now feel emboldened.
And if we zero in on the budget itself, the Liberals promised, generational investment. Does this meet that bar?
I think that at this stage we can only say this is a gamble to try to change things, but there's no guarantee it's going to pay off. Fundamentally, it is a shift from the previous Liberal government spending on big social programs to try to now unlock industrial policy that will help Canada respond to the challenges it faces, strengthen the economy. There's billions in new spending. There are tax incentives. But what there isn't is any real sense of what this means for Canadians right now, in this moment, and how that will improve their lives in the short term. To be fair, Adrienne, that's what the Prime Minister warned, that this shift is going to take some time. The government set the expectations for the budget. They were pretty high. So from that perspective, not sure they met the mark of transformational change. But that's what the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister will now have to try and sell to Canadians.
All right, Rosie, thank you.
You bet.
And Rosie will be back a little later in the show, first with her conversation with Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne on the Champagne budget. And then, of course, on a day like today with the At Issue panel, that is all in about 20 minutes. So 2 of the biggest measures in the budget are those cuts to the public service and huge investment in defense. Olivia Stefanovich looks at why these promises are coming right now.
With a federal budget proposing $60 billion in savings and cuts, the government says it has to make tough choices, and that includes reducing the public service.
It really saddens me to see that's the route that they're planning to go.
40,000 positions are on the chopping block over 5 years, representing 10% of federal public servants.
These are people with families who are part of communities, and right now they're worried because if you live in a small community or even a large community, how are you going to make ends meet?
Over the last decade, the federal public service grew double the rate of economic growth, to a peak of almost 370,000. The government wants to reduce that number to 330,000 by the end of the decade, mainly through retirements and voluntary departures.
You have to have some trade-offs. So either you raise taxes, revenues, which I don't think people would be crazy about, or you have to reduce some spending. And the choice they made is, in this case, the public service.
The government is also planning to slash funding for federal departments up to 15% by increasing the use of artificial intelligence and pulling back foreign aid to pre-pandemic levels. National Defense is also being asked to do its part by retiring aging military fleet, but it's also getting the biggest boost.
Probably the biggest 5-year commitment since the Korean War.
The budget sets aside $82 billion to rearm the Canadian military, but it's short on details.
Our allies are really looking for us not just to commit money, but lay out in concrete terms like how we get from point A to point B. We don't have that roadmap laid out the way that I was kind of expecting.
The budget doesn't say how that massive increase will help Canada meet its NATO targets, only that it will, putting the country on a path to spend 5% on GDP on defense by 2035. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
So clearly, there's a lot of money in play with this budget and a lot of plans in place. But let's bring in Peter Armstrong now to look a little closer at some of the economic questions here. So Peter, let's start off with what is the degree of difficulty, if you will, for actually implementing all these changes?
Yeah, it's high, Adrian, and the margin of error is slim as well. These are big, they're important changes, but remember, there's a very real crisis happening underfoot right now. You know, we'll get GDP numbers later this month that could very well show that the Canadian economy has slipped into a recession this summer. You know, what do we do if things get worse and not better? If job losses pile up and the unemployment rate climbs? What if new tariffs are imposed or some other major event derails the economy unexpectedly? There's not a lot in this budget that's going to be able to help with any of that.
Okay, so given that, how concerned do you think Canadian businesses are about the deficit?
You know, on the one hand, I think anyone hears that number. It's so big, it's almost hard to get your head around. Like, how can a government spend $78 billion more in a year than it brings in? But on the other hand, if you can zoom out and really try to think about this from an international perspective, you know, the investors with capital on the sidelines that are looking for a place to land, they look at Canada and say, well, compared to the United States, where the deficit there, Adrian, it's an eye-popping $1.8 trillion. You can see how they might consider Canada, you know, the cleanest dirty shirt or the safest port in a storm. And if these changes, it's a big if, but if they can draw in some of that capital, could well be worth it.
All right, we will all see. Peter Armstrong, thank you.
You bet.
So we'll have more on the budget later in the hour, but for now, let's turn to breaking news and a deadly cargo plane crash in Louisville, Kentucky tonight. So you are looking at the fiery crash scene stretching for more than a kilometer. The UPS plane crashed shortly after takeoff from Louisville International Airport. It was heading to Honolulu. As of late this evening, at least 4 people are dead, 11 others are injured, but Kentucky's governor expects those numbers to grow.
Anybody who has seen the images and the video know how violent this crash is. And there are a lot of families that are going to be waiting and wondering for a period of time. We're going to try to get them that information as fast as we can.
Indeed, as of right now, there are no details on how this happened. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating. Well, the government shutdown plaguing the U.S. has hit a milestone of sorts. It is now tied for the longest one ever. It's been dragging on for 35 days with Democrats and Republicans locked in a standoff. And the impacts are wide-ranging from huge lines at airports where unpaid staff are calling in sick to families and food banks scrambling after federal food assistance was halted. The White House says it will partially fund that program in line with court orders. And the United States is mourning one of its most powerful and controversial vice presidents tonight. Dick Cheney died yesterday from complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. Paul Hunter looks at Cheney's influence and legacy.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
By the time he was sworn in as U.S. Vice President to George W. Bush in 2001, Dick Cheney was already a long-standing force in Washington. A White House staffer under Richard Nixon, Chief of Staff to Gerald Ford, 10 years a lawmaker on Capitol Hill, and Secretary of Defense to George H.W. Bush, it was as Vice President that Cheney became as divisive as he was consequential.
The enemy has shown a capacity to inflict great damage on the United States, and we have to assume there will be more attacks.
After 9/11, Cheney cemented the view it was his hand that guided the Bush presidency, including pushing the false notion Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction and must be attacked. Critics slammed Cheney for that, but he always held firm.
What we did in Iraq was exactly the right thing to do. If I had it to recommend all over again, I would recommend exactly the same course of action.
Then there's that weird weekend in 2006 in Texas when Cheney, while quail hunting, accidentally shot his friend Harry Whittington in the chest, neck, and face. Though, as another Cheney friend described it,
unfortunately, Mr. Whittington was in the line of fire and got peppered pretty well.
Late-night comedians had a field day.
Peppering is what you do to a Caesar salad. He shot that dude.
In a statement, George W. Bush calls Cheney a decent, honorable man. His death, a loss to the nation. But the current president is a big-time Cheney critic. Cheney's daughter Liz supported Donald Trump's impeachment, Trump labeling both Cheneys warmongers.
He's a coward.
Then came this Dick Cheney campaign ad for his daughter.
In our nation's 246-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump.
On word of his death at age 84, Trump's White House lowered the flag for Dick Cheney, underlining U.S. law requires it. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
After 9 years in opposition, the conservative-leading Yukon Party won a majority government in Monday's territorial election.
Yukoners chose to move on from the status quo. They chose a new path. They chose change.
Curry Dixon will become the territory's next premier and the first Yukon-born to secure the top job. His party won 14 of the 21 ridings. Well, a powerful storm system known as a weather bomb is lashing parts of Newfoundland and Labrador tonight. Heavy rain and damaging winds knocked out power for thousands, with some residents along coastal areas forced to evacuate. A storm surge warning has also been issued, with waves expected to be as high as 12 meters. Well, for the first time in years, China is allowing group tourism to Canada.
We can't wait for the Chinese tours coming back to Canada.
Why this may signal a thaw in the relationship between the two countries. And meet the AI-generated artist cracking the Billboard charts. How musicians are responding to this industry shift. And Rosie sits down with the finance minister to cut through the numbers and what they mean for Canadians.
When you invest in infrastructure, when you invest in housing, when you invest in competitiveness and productivity, that's the challenge that Canada has been facing.
We're back in 2. Canada is once again among China's approved travel destinations. That means for the first time in years, Chinese tour groups can come here. Lisa Xing on the anticipated boost for the tourism industry and how the move could signal some warming relations.
One of Canada's most striking natural attractions, on display to visitors from China. Many of them group tours booked through Amy Kwong.
We can't wait for the Chinese tours coming back to Canada because we did have a very good years.
Those groups accounted for 60% of their business, but that dropped off completely 7 years ago.
Suddenly, 0%, no group tours.
In 2018, China-Canada relations hit an all-time low after tech giant Huawei's executive Meng Wanzhou was arrested in Vancouver on a U.S. extradition warrant, and China detained Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Then, when China loosened COVID travel restrictions in 2023, Canada was left off the approved list, a hit to the tourism industry.
They typically stay longer and spend more because there's such a significant difference, of course, in making that commitment to travel all the way here.
Now there are signs of a thaw. China's foreign ministry announcing the government is allowing group tours to Canada again, saying it will further people-to-people exchanges.
There has been work over the last number of months and weeks to recalibrate the relationship, and that work is ongoing.
And ramping up, the Foreign Affairs Minister recently went to China. Last week, Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea.
We agreed this meeting marked a turning point.
Especially as U.S. President Donald Trump continues to wage his global trade war, Ottawa has little choice but to build better ties with Beijing, says this analyst.
It's a significant country. It has a large economy, but increasingly it's also helping to shape the international system. So we have to engage.
Which means this could be just the first step in repairing relations. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Residents in a northern Saskatchewan community are slowly returning and rebuilding after wildfire destroyed more than 200 homes last summer. Helena Mahalik shows us the challenges they face and the changes being made with the next fire season in mind.
Brooke Kindle watches her children play in the empty lot that used to be their family home. Her house, like over 200 others in Denair Beach, lost to the flames of this year's unprecedented wildfire season. Kindle was pregnant when she evacuated from the community. Now she's come back as a family of 5, with everyone squeezed into a 1-bedroom cabin.
It's honestly a really big upgrade from living in the camper. We're happy, we're cozy.
It was nearly 5 months ago that parts of this town were leveled, a wasteland of ash and debris. Now, after a massive community effort to clear the rubble, some families are ready to move on, but others are still worried about what next summer could bring.
So we're just trying to figure out as a town, how can we incentivize people to come back here? People are obviously scared about another wildfire happening.
On a reserve on the south side of Denair Beach, one of 8 Peter Ballantine Cree Nation communities, crews are hard at work trying to get structures up before the snow flies, while keeping future wildfire seasons in mind with some of the building materials.
It's a composite concrete. It's lighter than concrete, but it's fire resistant.
But the chief says the community needs more firefighting equipment to ensure history doesn't repeat itself. At the beginning of October, the province moved in more than 30 mobile trailers up to a nearby town as temporary shelter. This couple, whose wedding was canceled due to the evacuation, is waiting for their ready-to-move home to be brought in.
The more structures go up, the more cleanup gets done, and we will be all way tougher and way more close-knit.
Amid the grief and the loss, people here in Denair Beach are rebuilding, but want reassurance this won't happen again. They're calling on the government of Saskatchewan to invest in more fire mitigation resources. Helena Mahalik, CBC News, Denair Beach, Saskatchewan.
An AI-powered artist has made its way onto the Billboard charts.
It's okay to fall here.
A look and listen at the music blurring ethical lines.
This budget must be generational in its ambition.
And as the Carney government unveils its first budget, a Conservative MP crosses the floor. Rosie and our At Issue panel are here to go through this very big day. The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next. Two-time WNBA champion Sandy Brondello will be the first head coach of Toronto's new women's basketball franchise, the Tempo.
This is Canada's team, and I thought that would be very exciting, and I'm up for every challenge. Hopefully we can get some pretty special players to represent, obviously the Tempo.
Okay,
After more than a decade of coaching in the league, the Australian will look to shape the first WNBA franchise outside of the U.S. The Tempo's inaugural season tips off in 2026. Well, an AI-generated song is breaking new ground by landing on a Billboard radio chart. Magda Gabrisalasa explains what's behind the music and why not everyone is singing its praises.
Well, if you didn't know, this is Zanaya Monet.
Hi, you guys.
The AI-generated R&B singer reportedly has a multi-million-dollar record deal. It's been popping up on social media and streaming services. Now Billboard says Monet has hit one of its radio charts, the first known AI artist to do so.
You ride what you got, Trizzy.
While this radio personality has heard the music,
it sounds like a great Southern R&B artist.
He says no way is Monet getting any play from him.
There's a ton of real artists here in the city, let alone across the world, that are just waiting to be discovered and heard. So, you know, let's put our time and effort into that.
Monet has real musicians fired up too.
Artists were already so mad that they're already seeing next to nothing from their work online and their work in digital music spaces. And they're saying this is another slap in the face from this industry.
Living wage for who? His advocacy group is pushing for legislation that includes AI protections, but experts say the law is playing catch up.
And the law needs to react to that technology, and that happens through a combination of lawsuits, settlements, statute, etc.
And it's already happening. Suno, the AI program Monet relies on to create its music, is facing copyright infringement accusations.
You've been putting in work.
Reports say there's a real person behind Monet. Its creator, according to Billboard, is a poet named Talisha Nikki Jones.
So she turned her poetry to song.
This is Monet's manager.
Music is the great connector, and we were able to use that to reach the world.
But not everyone is willing to tune in to what this AI is putting out. Magda Gabrisalasa, CBC News, Toronto.
Time now to dig deeper into the big story that's shaping our world today. Billed as a generational shift, Mark Carney's government delivers its first federal budget.
Mr. Speaker, the budget I present today comes at a time of profound change, a time to build.
Big on investment with an increased deficit. The Liberals claim their fiscal plan will move the country from reliance to resilience.
We're going to build this country like never before. We're going to protect our sovereignty. We're going to empower Canadians.
Now, shortly after tabling that budget, François-Philippe Champagne sat down with CBC's chief political correspondent, Rosie Barton, who asked the finance minister what message he's trying to send to Canadians.
And the finance minister joins me now. Nice to see you, Minister.
It's a real pleasure to be with you.
You and the Prime Minister said this would be a generational budget, a transformational budget. You say it will bring in $1 trillion in investment over the next 5 years. Liberals have promised investment in the past, and it hasn't really manifested. What's different this time around? How is this budget different in terms of spurring investment?
Well, the choice of investments. I mean, you know, you would see that when you invest in infrastructure, when you invest in housing, when you invest in competitiveness and productivity, that's the challenge that Canada has been facing, you know, productivity for a long, long time. And with the budget measures we have, we didn't want to supercharge growth in this country. I mean, that's why I say it's a generational shift, because first of all, we say, we're going to balance the operating budget with revenues by 2028, 29. And then everything we'll borrow will be for capital growth, so making the investments to grow the economy. So even the International Monetary Fund, you may have seen, they said there's really two countries in the G7 who can do that. It's Germany and Canada. And the type of investments you make like that, those are generational in nature. And that's how you create more growth and more prosperity in the country.
What does that do to help Canadians right now? Canadians who are having a hard time paying rent, having a hard time buying groceries. What does this do right now?
Certainly. Well, 75% of what you've seen in the deficit is really, on one end, to have measures on affordability, and the other one for our sovereignty. On affordability, measures in the budget, workers. You know, if you're watching and you're in Oshawa or you're in Windsor, you say, it's really tough now. it's really tough for the industry. We need to support our workers. There's a number of measures to do that. There's a number of measures also for our youth, because they're facing higher unemployment that we've seen in a long time, to make sure that they get a chance to get that job. You know, when they send that resume, that someone would answer the phone. We are making generational investment in housing, affordable housing. You say affordability for me often starts with a place to live that you can afford. So these are real measures to make sure that Canadians can go by now, but at the same time, having a vision towards the long term, because the world, I mean, the speed, scope, and scale of what we're seeing is quite unprecedented. I mean, people feel it in the field, at home, on the factory floor, and that's why we need to have this big pivot that we had since, you know, last time, probably 1945.
$78 billion is the deficit, and that is without the trade war being resolved, and the talks with Donald Trump haven't restarted. What happens if that doesn't get resolved? What happens to those industries that are being hammered right now because of those tariffs that are still in place?
Well, we need to do what we say, and that's why you say we need to become our own best customers. We need to build one Canadian economy. We need to rebuild our infrastructure so we're not as much reliant on one particular country. We said we need to move from, you know, reliance to resilience, to make sure that we have other trading partners around the world. And when I look at Canada compared to other nations, you know, we are a magnet for talent. We have very strong industries. We have critical minerals. We have energy. We have a free trade with all the other G7 nations. And this budget is supercharging growth. I mean, now, even if you look on the tax rate, we'll be more competitive than the United States, because one thing is to have measures to entice the private sector to invest more in Canada. Right. And that's why the infrastructure piece also will help, because municipalities will be able to go ahead with projects. Provinces, the same thing on mining and oil and gas. And that's why I think the role of the federal government is to provide these incentives to make sure that we attract this capital and grow our economy.
You're going to reduce the federal workforce by nearly 40,000 over 5 years. That is worrying to many Canadians who work in the public sector, and who are also, and Canadians who are worried about the services and whether you're going to be able to deliver services if you get rid of that many workers.
Well, two things with that. I mean, the first one that I would say is that we need to bring back the size of the civil service to a more sustainable level. I think we've seen since COVID, you know, the growth, and that's not sustainable. We need to get back to something that's more sustainable. We appreciate greatly the civil service. They do great things to deliver service for Canadians, but there's also new technologies that can help us to deliver better services. Artificial intelligence processes. You've seen with the revenue agency when I asked them, you know, let's improve to do better services. And I would say that when you look at the numbers in the budget, a fair amount of that is going to be to what we call normal attrition. You know, people who retire, people who decide to go voluntarily. But I think it is tough, but we're going to be compassionate. We're going to be judicious in our choice, because I understand that behind that there's families, there's people. So we're going to be compassionate. But at the same time, I would say, Rosemary, Canadians have elected us to make tough choices and the right decision. We're going to be fair and compassionate in how we do that.
Okay. Will you get it passed? Chris D'Entremont is now a Liberal MP, in case you hadn't heard.
I had a busy day, but I heard there's a lot of good things that happened today.
So that's 2 votes that you need. Are you confident that you'll get it passed?
Well, I would say there's something for every political party in that budget. You know, when you're talking, think about the health infrastructure.
Yeah.
For the first time, the federal government is saying, you know, we're going to help you with the hospitals, with the clinics. You know, Canadians face that. They said we need to modernize, revamp some of these facilities. So when they're going to make their final decision, they really have to say what are they going to say to their constituents. You know, think about the military. Are you going to say really to our armed forces that we should not be investing so they have the equipment and the technology? When you're looking at the NDP, even the Canadian Labour Congress said, you know, this is a budget that puts, workers at the heart of the economic strategy of the country. So I think there's a lot for these parties to reflect on, because it's not about themselves, by the way, it's about the people they represent. And going back to your constituent and say, you know what, we didn't support, for example, health infrastructure. We didn't really support our armed forces. We're not there when workers need it and pivot. This is a generational moment, and my message to Canadians: we're going to be okay. There's a lot of headwind, there's a lot of uncertainty, but we say this budget is to make sure that you, your family, Your kids will have a future. We're going to grow our economy. We're going to do the things that we should have done in, for a bit of time. And now we're taking it and we're pivoting to make sure we're all going to be better off.
Got to leave it there. Thank you, Minister. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
After the break, Rosie's back with the Ad Issue panel.
Hey, Adrian, tonight we're going to talk about the budget and why the Carney government believes that it will help Canada in this moment.
I have confidence that together we can build Canada, protect our way of life, and empower Canadians like never before.
So what do these cuts and investments mean for Canada's economic outlook? Will the budget get passed? Chantal, Andrew, and Althea join me to talk about Mark Carney's first budget as Prime Minister. At issue, the federal budget. Mark Carney unveils his government's plan to strengthen Canada and respond to the trade uncertainty from the U.S.
We will build here at home stronger industries, nation-building infrastructures, and millions of more homes for Canadians. We will protect what matters most, our people, our communities, and our sovereignty.
So what's to be made of this first budget under a Mark Carney government and these so-called generational investments? Will they kickstart Canada's economy? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it all down tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. Good to see you all a second time today. Let's start with the budget, then we'll talk about some of the political moves that have happened today. Andrew, what did you make of whether the budget delivered on what it promised to do, which is to transform the economy in a big way?
And to move the moon and the stars and 6 other things. I've never heard such hype in the run-up to an election in my life. It was going to be generational and transformative, and at the same time it was going to involve sacrifices and difficult choices. And at the end of the day, with the exception of the increase in health in defense spending, you could pretty much imagine the Justin Trudeau government delivering the same budget. It's not a huge amount of difference. There's a lot of spending, which we're now taught to call capital spending, which somehow makes it different. Well, that would be more persuasive if there'd been some offsetting cut in non-capital spending and operational spending, but there's very little. It's $13 billion out of $500 billion budget is not a particularly impressive expenditure review. And it'd be more persuasive if we had some real indication that that capital spending was going to lead to higher productive capacity for the economy and therefore more revenues for the government. One indication of why we might doubt that is the ratio of debt costs to revenues is going to go up from 6 cents on the dollar a couple of years ago to 13 cents on the dollar. That's not crisis levels. In 1995, we were spending 36 cents of every dollar on interests, but it's not a particularly appetizing trend. So that's, I think, the biggest failing is there's really not much in the way of a growth strategy in this budget. I would hope we were going to see radical tax reform to really gin up the incentive to invest in this country, even in the face of Donald Trump's tariffs. In the end, what we got was a few warmed over things that they'd already announced on accelerated deductions with a couple of new ones, but it just really doesn't add up to that much.
Althea, do you think it meets the moment?
There's so much I want to say about what Andrew just said. Does it meet the moment?
We have Thursday too.
I don't know, because it's hard to, what is the moment? Is the moment that we are in anemic growth, that we're facing Donald Trump, that we have elected a technocrat who has a very clear vision for where he wants to go? And he has delivered that budget. I do think it was overhyped. I don't agree that it doesn't do anything for growth. I do think it tries to get there, but it tries to get there with the heavy hand of the state and not maybe what Andrew wants to see, which is deep tax cuts and tax reform. But I do not see a scenario in which Justin Trudeau would ever have delivered this budget. If anything, this is Mark Carney shedding the skin of Justin Trudeau and saying, hello, I'm a new person, and if anything, I want to be more closely aligned with Stephen Harper in terms of the public sector cuts. They're actually deeper than what Stephen Harper did. And some of the things that you're like, did they know they were doing this, or have they done this on purpose? For example, the copays with refugees on their health care. Remember the whole controversy with Stephen Harper and refugee health care funding? The cuts he made to that, the cuts to international development. Mark Carney is breaking his promise from the last election and going deep with cuts on international development. He's even making cuts at Statistics Canada to lower the frequency of some of the data sets. So I can't see how this is a Justin Trudeau government. If anything, it's attacking the Trudeau government legacy on climate as well.
Okay, Chantal, your take.
Certainly, they are guilty of overselling and under-delivering, which breaks a cardinal rule of politics. You're supposed to do the reverse. So chances are public opinion will be underwhelmed by this budget, but I side more with Althea. One is saying the Trudeau budget, the other her Harper budget. I think Stephen Harper, in the same circumstances, would be more likely to have crafted a budget like this than Justin Trudeau. And I also think that politically there is a rationale for presenting a budget that Stephen Harper might have been able to live with. As for the deficit and the difference between the last Freeland budget and this budget, I think you can see Donald Trump behind the lines of this budget big time in the ways that the economic situation is presented bears no resemblance to the last full-fledged federal budget. Also in the spending, we'll see. I believe that it either moves private investment or it doesn't, and that's going to be the test of its success or failure.
Okay, I'm running out of time, and as I said, we have Thursday too, but what happened with Chris d'Entremont today? Resigning from the Conservative caucus, crossing the floor and becoming a Liberal. Andrew, how damaging is that for Pierre Poilievre?
Well, the timing is exquisite, of course. Just when you're trying to mount your attack on the federal budget, now he's going to be answering questions about this. I think the only question is, are there other shoes to drop? There is a lot of discontent within sections of the Conservative caucus with Pierre Poilievre's leadership. I don't think that's a secret. There's been rumors until now, but this is the first one who's actually broken ranks. We'll see if there's others.
Althea, what are you hearing?
Well, there are names circulating, but it's hard to know if it's the beginning of the parade or if it's the end of the parade. One thing, frankly, is that this is not an election budget. The Liberals had no intention of running on this budget. There is no, to use Chrystia Freeland's word, costly political gimmick in this budget. There is no nod to affordability. All the MPs are having to all the grid MPs are having to look back to June and July and point to the tax cut that they ran on in the spring budget to address affordability concerns. So if anybody's looking like what's in it for me directly, you're not going to find anything there. So it is basically hoping and praying that the NDP or that the Green and that a Bloc or a Conservative decides that they don't want to cost the election and they're willing to hold their noses and vote for this.
Chantal, on the politics and the loss of Chris d'Entremont to Pierre Poilievre?
I am hearing that there are others who are reflecting on this, and that I agree with Althea. It does not look like an election platform, but it does look like a budget that is meant to attract the Conservative dissidents that may be thinking that they'd rather run under a progressive Conservative Prime Minister, i.e. Mark Carney, than under Pierre Poilievre.
And what does that mean for his leadership in the long term, do you think?
I have seen nothing today from all the messages I got that bodes well for Pierre Poilievre's leadership, and that 20-point gap in the evaluation of voters of the performance of one versus the other does not bode well either.
Okay, there will be more to talk about on Thursday. Other things will happen. We'll do that then. Maybe we'll have more of the details of what we have looked at today. Thank you all very much for being here. That is At Issue. I'm Rosemary Barton. We'll see you back here on Thursday. Now back to Adrian in Toronto.
Thank you, friend. Well, coming up, a convincing Halloween costume tricks some LA club goers.
People were like murmuring, like they legitimately were convinced. I'm like, there's no way that people actually think I'm Pitbull.
The look-alike Mr. Worldwide in our moment. This is Pitbull. Well, sort of. Stay with me here. It's actually a man named Brad Stoll, who is an LA resident, who dressed up as Pitbull, who's an American singer and rapper, and he dressed up for Halloween and tricked a nightclub into thinking he was the real deal. So Stoll was able to skip the line at a club, even performed a couple well-known songs, posing as Mr. Worldwide, and tonight, his convincing act is our moment.
Pitbull doesn't wait in line.
You don't look like Pitbull.
Yo, we got Pitbull in the house. Yo.
It was Halloween. When we were walking up to the bar, I had people like scream like, "Oh, Mr. 305, Mr. Worldwide." Those are people just recognizing like I had a good costume. The bouncer came up to us. I didn't say I was Pitbull. I just said, "I'm performing tonight." He's like, "Oh, okay," and just let us in. People were like murmuring, like they legitimately were convinced. I'm like, there's no way that people actually think I'm Pitbull. Torn Martinez, he's a DJ that was performing that night. He says, "We got Pitbull in the house tonight." People go out of their mind. I see like 10 phones just rise up, and I'm like, oh my God, they actually might think I'm Pitbull. Let's give the people what they want. There are girls that are literally saying, "I can't believe Pitbull's here. This is insane." I felt like a rock star. We stayed on the DJ booth and we went out the back, which also gives it that like famous element. It was the craziest night of my life. I never thought in my wildest dreams that my Halloween would be spent being Pitbull.
Well, if you're going to go all in, go all in. Apparently, this club regularly sees celebrities, so they were just like, oh, okay, here comes another one. The good news for him is that the real Pitbull saw his post and reposted it. So in the world of social media, huge win for him. From all of us at The National, thanks for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.